Hey, everybody, and good evening, and welcome to another episode of the HR Plug podcast. I am LaShawn Davis. I'm your host. This evening, as we prepare to talk about things that leaders need to know to handle and take care of the needs of the workforce, of the employees, we all know that times have changed. Specifically after COVID, more so, we have more employees who now have found value in what they do because of what happened to our economy during COVID when businesses had to shut down and some of our frontline workers had to continue working. And it created a huge divide between hybrid working and working from home completely and those employees who still had to show up in the office. And so the trajectory of how we work and how we support our teams has drastically changed. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. How can leaders meet those ever changing needs? How can HR professionals support leaders meeting those needs? And how can HR professionals continue to balance the gap between what is happening with our society and in the workplace? We'll be tackling all of those tonight. As usual, when you are here, say hello. I do see we have some people here, and I just want to acknowledge you and thank you for being with us this evening. Hi, Tamara or Tamara. I hope I said that correctly. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining. Hi, Ashley. Welcome to the show. So glad you are here. I met Ashley not too long ago on LinkedIn, and she is really doing her thing with helping you guys with your resumes, helping you transition into the careers that work well for you. And she's truly committed to that. So go check Ashley out on LinkedIn and see how she can help you. But anyway, as you tune in, drop by, let me know you're here, let me know you're watching. I always appreciate your support in the show. Our guest tonight, Nicole Collins. Nicole might come on. She is running a little behind, and I didn't want to leave you guys waiting. But if she doesn't make it on tonight, we will surely get her on another episode because she certainly has a lot to share about what leaders and HR professionals should be doing to take care of their team. But until then, there are a few things that I want to share with you and a few announcements that I do have to share with you all as well. First, I want to talk about Unplug 2024. Yes, we're talking about Unplug already. We just ended this last year, this last conference last month, the end of March. And, you know, it's no, if you came to the conference, you'll understand why it takes about a year to plan. So we're going to go ahead and start planning that. So be sure that you go check out unplugconference.com, sign up for the mailing list so that you're informed when tickets go on sale, when our themes are going to be, if you want to be a vendor, if you want to be a sponsor. All of those things are things that we need to make the event a success. A little bit about Unplug Conference. It's an platform, an avenue for business leaders and HR professionals to literally unplug from their day-to-day work and really feed themselves, fuel themselves, refill their cup, because our day of working is a lot. We're drained, we're pulled on, we're tugged on, we're expecting to take care of everybody else, and the Unplug Conference gives you an opportunity to take care of you. So if you missed this year's event, don't worry, we'll be back next year, and it's going to be on April the 4th and 5th. That's a Friday, Thursday and a Friday of 2024. So go ahead and mark your calendars and be on the lookout for announcements for Unplug 2024. I also want to share with you guys that we are launching a new mentorship program called Distinguished. Distinguished is a mentorship program if you are in a career or you're looking to segue into your own business that is tied to something that you've done in your career. We can help you with that with a lifetime mentorship program. Now, Distinguish is a program that is a 12-week long journey that I take you through to help understand your true identity and your true purpose so that you can be positioned correctly to be the impact that you've been called to be in the world. A lot of people feel burnt out and stressed out and anxiety in the workplace because they're not where they should be. They either feel stuck because they've been there for so many years, or it's where somebody else wanted them to be. So they're living into somebody else's intentions for them, or they're in a place of comfort where they've been there and they don't know anything else and they're a little fearful of stepping out on faith. So in the Distinguished Mentorship Program, we take you through a journey that allows you to understand who you are, your purpose, what you've been called to, what you've been called to do, what solution are you, what answer are you. And that's how it goes through this community of people who all go through it at the same time. And this came about because during the conference, I asked one question of everybody to tell me, who are you? And so if I sit and ask you that question, how would you respond? If I said, who are you? If you initially think about responding by telling me I'm an HR manager, I'm a business leader, I'm a business owner, or you respond by telling me what you do, that's not who you are. And a lot of times we miss our identity mark because we affiliate or equate what we do to our identity. And that's not who we are. It's what we do. It's like if you think about companies like Nike, for example, when you ask Nike as a company, what do? They don't say we sell shoes. If you ask Nike, who are you? They're not going to say we sell shoes. We're an athletic brand company. No, they're going to tell you we inspire and motivate ambition and drive to get up and just go do it. And the way they do that is supported by products like shoes and apparel and sports gear and athletic wear and things like that. But it's not who they are. We affiliate Starbucks with maybe being coffee, right? But that's not who they are. It's a service that they provide. Who they are is a company centered around community. So they create shops that people can come congregate together and have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea. But it's not who they are. The beverages is not who they are. If you think about Ring doorbell, if I say, who is Ring? What is it? What is Ring? You're going to tell me, oh, they're a video surveillance doorbell company that will show you who's at your door. But again, that's a product or a service. It's not their identity. Who they are is security, a company who cares about you being safe, sound, and secure. So when we think about ourselves, when we say, who are you reciting something that you do, something that you support, something that you launch or you serve? Or are you stating exactly who it is that you are? And so I found that a lot of people struggled with that. A lot of people had difficulty truly saying who they are. And this program, Distinguished, helps you uncover your identity first, because it's until then that you can truly walk in your purpose. So if you're interested in learning more about the Distinguished Mentorship Program, be sure to head over to www.thegreatnesslab.com and you can learn more about that. There's going to be an in-person session coming up June 2nd and 3rd in the Atlanta area. That's a Friday and a Saturday. It's going to be the accelerated program to the 12-week component. So you'll be able to get everything that you get out of the 12-week program in 4 days. It's 2 days in person and 2 days virtual, because we have to quantum leap into our purposes if we're truly going to drive the change that we want to see in the world. So make sure you check that out. Again, that's www.thegreatnesslab.com, and understand more about tapping into the level of greatness that you possess so that you can be the answer and the solution that you've been called to be to the world. Now, as I segue into tonight's topic, we're talking about how to support this ever changing and this ever evolving workplace that is now in our economy. We have employees who are now taking a stand to demand better. How did we even get here? It all started with COVID. If you think about COVID, we went to the economy being completely shut down. Nobody could go to work. Nobody in a service industry could go to work because restaurants were closed. Travel was closed. Hospitality was closed. So all of these individuals had to remain home until the economy opened back up. But the economy did allow essential places to remain open. So your hospitals, your pharmacies, your grocery stores, all of those places never shut down. Essentially, what that means is that those employees still had to show up in the workplace, go out into a world of COVID, which we didn't know much about, and still work and go into crowded places in some situations and still be around people at a time where we were telling everybody else to socially distance. It's those workers, those frontline employees who felt the most neglected and most abandoned during the time of COVID. It's those workers that also showed us how much our economy relies on them. So when enough people had enough, a few things happened. You heard about the Great Resignation, people quitting jobs where they didn't feel that they were valued or that they didn't feel that their safety was a priority for the company. Then you heard about quiet quitting, where people stayed at a job because they needed it, but did the bare minimal or just enough to meet the expectations. There were all of these trends going around simply because employees were unhappy, uncommitted, or felt devalued. And believe it or not, those same feelings were at the managerial level, the supervisory level, and the HR level. Companies still had an obligation and responsibility to deliver their services. How do they do it? With keeping the doors open, keeping the employees happy so that they can continue to keep their profits running. That became the pause, because what was happening was we were having employees more and more find distrust with their employers and doing something that has been coined standing in solidarity. So you will see companies like Starbucks and Amazon and Apple and all of these places and their employees standing in solidarity together. And the community would join in and stand in solidarity with them. And all that means is, I don't like the way you're treating me, so we're going to not work. We're going to walk out. We're going to all call out on the same day so that the company can feel the brunt of what work is like, what your company would be like without us there. And that started happening. And it started in Buffalo, New York in about December of 2021 when those Starbucks employees walked out and customers went to be serviced and the doors had notes on them that said, "We're not working in these conditions." It opened up a whirlwind of unions and things that employees started relying on to be the voice for them with their employers. And that left a whole lot of employers now wondering, how do I keep my employees satisfied so that they don't walk out? How do I protect myself from the legal risk involved with the National Labor Relations Act, which gives bargain eligible employees the right to do this without repercussions? How do I maintain a workforce that will continually produce so that my business can operate? No longer are there days when people were excited to be at work just because they were getting a paycheck. People want to be acknowledged and feel honored and valued for the work that they contribute to you being able to make money. And so that's what has us here today. I'm going to share with you some of the things that cultures have to understand. The workplace culture has to understand if you want to be in business much longer, because the future of work is more than just AI and technology. It also is how we deal with the individuals that we're relying on to get business needs met. So, with that, the first thing that I want to tell you is the biggest misconception out there that I've heard leaders say is, no matter what I do, I treat everybody the same and I still run into issues. I'm trying to be fair and I still run into issues. I don't know what else to do because we cannot please everybody. Now, while that is a true statement, one of the things that leaders and companies will need to understand as we work to meet the need of the evolving employee populations is this. It is impossible to run your business by treating everybody the same. You cannot do it. So the energy that you're investing into trying to be equal is a lost cause because everyone cannot be treated equal. Leadership now requires you to understand the individual needs of your employees, not the collective need of the company. So what that means is you're going to have to understand who people are, not just what they do or how they produce, which is why your identity is so important. So let me give you an example of this. A lot of times you hear the term equality and equity used interchangeably, and it's not the same. You do not want to strive for equality. What you want to strive for is equity in the workplace. Equality suggests that everybody gets the same thing the same way. Equity takes into account that there are circumstances and situations that might make it more difficult or more challenging for some groups over others. So we need to adjust how we meet the need for the varying groups. So think about it this way. If you're on a playground and there's a fence, and over the fence there's this cute little bunny rabbit, and a bunch of 5-year-olds run over to the fence and they want to see over the fence because they want to see the bunny rabbits, but they can't see because they're too short. So there's 3 of them trying to look over this fence, right? But they're all 3 different heights. You have one 5-year-old who's a little bit taller and everybody thinks she's 7 or 8. You have another 5-year-old who's a little bit shorter and everybody thinks she's just 4 because she's so tiny. And then you have your average sized 5-year-old. Now, the 3 of them at the fence cannot see over the fence. But if you bought them each the same box that was at the same height, you could assume that there might be some that still have difficulty seeing over the fence because they're not tall enough. The leadership of today would mean you would assess what size box each of those 5-year-olds need so that they all can see over the fence. It's not just giving them a box and say, I provided you the resource, now make it work. Because of challenges, because of their situation or circumstances, impede them from achieving success based on the tools that you've given that are standard. Leadership today requires you now to assess situations, get to know your employees and understand their individual needs so that they can have the appropriate tools that lead to an equal outcome. So equity is about equal outcome. Everyone has the ability and the opportunity to have the same outcome despite varying circumstances and situations that might create gaps or hindrances for them. So as you go back to your teams, I want you to think about the tools and the resources that you have in place for people to be successful. What are your metrics? Is it based on speed? What are the things that you are judging or using to determine that people are satisfactorily meeting your expectations? And Are those expectations conducive to having an outcome that's equal, or are they a one size fits all approach? And Ashley has a great point. She says, agreed. It's not a one size fits all. Everyone has different needs. So, coming into the work world of today, it's important that you understand what those needs are. And the only way you're really going to know is by asking them. And asking them really shows that you care. How can I best support you in the way that you learn? How can I best support you achieve this goal? What setbacks or challenges are keeping you from being able to meet this expectations? Ask the open-ended questions to help get the answers so that you can ensure that your team is set up for success. So, it's dismissing the notion that you as a leader are charged with treating everybody equally, because that is no longer an expectation as we go into the future of work. So I want to also share with you all the second piece about what you need to expect as we're going into the future of work. And that has to do with what's happening socially in the communities outside of the workplace. A long time ago, we used to say, what happens in work is only work related. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about social issues and social views. But that's not necessarily the case anymore. Now, as an employer, because emotion is such a strong factor and contributor in the workplace today, it has to be something that you do not dismiss from your employees. So let me give you an example of that. Not too long ago, maybe last year sometime, in Buffalo, New York, we had this shooting that was a targeted shooting toward African American or Black Americans that were shopping in a grocery store called Toppers. This individual who went in with the sole notion to kill people that day who were Black. He studied the grocery store. He looked at the trends, when it would be the most busiest, and when when they would be able to get the most people killed that day. That was his premonition. That was his notion. There was so much evidence in this that there had even been conversations that he had online plotting this out for this community. So the news published all of this. And unfortunately, that day, several people were murdered. If you were an employer that operated out of Buffalo, New York during that time, you would need to be very in tune what was happening socially outside of the walls of your business, because now what's happening socially impacts the people that are in your business. So you have potentially people who are either Black or African American, or people who empathize with the situation, or people who are still impacted by the situation, who may have difficulty coming to work, who may not feel safe coming to work. And it's important that we recognize this and we give them an opportunity to take the time that they need to adjust. It means if I'm calling out of work because of a social issue that happened with the Black community, and I tell you I am not safe coming to work, or I don't feel safe because this just happened down the street to my community, it's as an employer saying, take the time you need. It's as an employer saying, let me give you EAP services and go ahead and work from home today. It's as an employer saying, how can I support you through this? Is there anything that you need from me? But it's not, well, you'll get an attendance point. It's not, we have a no fault attendance policy, so if you don't come to work, you understand the consequences of that. It's about being in tune to know that what happens socially impacts the employees in your workplace. And if you care about the employees, you have to care about what's happening socially. That doesn't mean that you have to come up with a solution for it. It simply means that you just have to have empathy about it. You have to understand that they may have needs around that. It also means not tolerating insensitive comments that are made about social issues. So in this same example that I shared with you, it was on the news not too much later that in another location in the area, there was a leader of an organization that posted a joke about what happened at this grocery store. Specifically, the joke was talking about we have a cleanup on aisle 3, on 4, and aisle 5 until the joke went through the number of aisles to represent the number of people that were killed that day in the grocery store. The joke was about the bodies that were in the grocery store, denoting it as a cleanup. Now, a lot of people saw this and was disgusted, and there were others who saw it who laughed and thought, man, you are crazy. It's too soon for that. And then there were others who were offended. When leaders work for you and they behave or exhibit conduct that is offensive, whether or not you agree with it, and it impacts people in your organization, you have to care. You cannot simply ignore it and say that has nothing to do with work. This happened outside of work. This has nothing to do with you. Those days are over. Your team is looking for you to care about their experience inside and outside of work. And the employer that continues to ignore what happens outside of work is the employer that's going to create the most disengagement with their team. And when you have disengagement, it's impossible to rely on your team to build results for you because they don't care. Why would they when you don't care about them? So be in tune with what's happening with the demographic of the people who work in your organization. Show empathy, as Tamara said. Thank you for that. Empathetic. Be empathetic. Even if you don't understand, it means that you care enough about the situation because they do understand. Employers and managers and supervisors will need to be in tune to what's happening socially to the people that are in your workplace. Still having expectations to meet job requirements. No one is saying to dismiss that, but it's being empathetic to the things that could be hindering them to perform at their best. It's being understanding when they need time off. It's not being punitive or chastising if they are asking for something continually because they need it. It's putting yourself in their shoes and thinking about how you would feel if it were you or somebody that you love. So that would be number 2. Be in tune with what's happening socially and how it impacts your team internally, and make sure that you are showing care and consideration and being empathetic when you can. That segues into number 3, which has everything to do with emotional intelligence. A lot of people believe that emotional intelligence is just about the other person. It's about how the other person feels, and oh, I got to walk on eggshells because this person is so sensitive, and all of that. And that's not what emotional intelligence is about. Empathy has a lot to do with emotional intelligence. So you should not be a leader who says you have a strong emotional intelligence IQ, but you lack empathy, or your team feels like you're not empathetic to what they might be addressing or encountering socially. So I see Nicole here. You must have had some issues trying to log in. Hi, Nicole. You said there are so many corporate leaders that lack empathy because they are driven by profits and the bottom line. And that is so true. Profits cannot be your driver or motivator this season of work. It cannot be. You will lose your company altogether if you don't take care of people first and then profit. You will not be profitable if the people you're relying on to push out that product that's making you profit is disengaged. They can do more harm for your company than good. This is not the same time as before, where people were proud of being 25 years with the company, 30 years with the company, and they're going to work their hardest to make you look good. We're not there anymore. We're at a time now where employees are aware of the value that they bring to the organization and understand that without them, you will have no profits. So if you don't take care of me, I won't take care of you because I'm going to put me first. As an employer, you have to support them putting them first, because putting them first shows them that you care, and it's that caring concern that's genuine that's going to make them want to see you win. So Ashley says their title is people leader, not profit leader. Oh man, that is so true. And they get it twisted. We are seeing the backlash and the fallout of this now. We absolutely are. If you look at the rise of unions, unions only became popular when they did back in the day, primarily in manufacturing and industrial environments. That's why they're so common in the Midwest and in the Northeast and in the North, because that's where all of your manual labor jobs were. I want you to think about, there's this famous picture of these guys. It's a black and white picture, and they're sitting on this beam and they're eating their sandwiches and their feet are just dangling off of this high beam. When you think about that picture, they don't have on any type of safety gear or equipment. They're just sitting up there enjoying their lunch, right? Well, that's why unions became popular, because in those types of environments, there was no care or concern about the safety. It was only a push for productivity. Unions are popular when employees feel like the employers don't care about them. That's what happened then. So people were dying on the job, people were losing limbs, people were losing fingers, and employees had said enough is enough. Labor unions came into play, put in demands, put in contracts that companies had to adhere to when it came to the working conditions for their members. So unions are a third party. They are an organization that you pay to represent you in dealing with your manager, or with your organization, I should say. You go to the union, you tell them we want these demands. The union goes to the employer, they negotiate those demands, and then the contract is birthed from that. And the contract is what governs the employee-employer relationship. That's how unions work. Unions died down because OSHA came. And OSHA is a federal government agency that now has precautions in place to help employees feel safe. So when the government put in parameters to make employers do things that they wouldn't lose their life on the job for, unions started becoming less and less popular. As unions died down, employers gained the upper hand, because now they had structure and parameters and laws that they had to adhere to, just like Department of Labor and how they pay you, just like OSHA now and how the safety, works. And that was all established because of the injuries and the accidents that were happening on the job. Unions had a lot of power because they can demand and dictate what your employer does once they're in place. Like Tamara's reminded me, or strike. Yes, unions have the liberty to call a strike, which means all of their members will not come to work, and good luck getting your operation to run. That's why most companies do not want unions, because they do not want a third party governing the relationship between them and their employee. They want to be able to have free reign and autonomy to take care of their employees the way that they need to. I believe every employer should do that. The problem is every employer does not do that. And they get boggled down or blinded by greed. And then they start pushing the boundaries and starting not to care about how much overtime they're mandating, the hours they're scheduling, how often they're having people working there, what they're paying people versus what they're making, the imbalance behind it. All of these things signify, I don't care about you. I just want you to work for me. And it's those things today that are leading employees to feel like they want a union. That's why now you start seeing unions in the South, in Alabama pop up, in Florida pop up, in Louisiana pop up, areas never before known for unions because they were not the industrialized manufacturing, distribution, heavily manually labor areas. But now, in the future of work, what leaders need to understand when it comes to taking care of employees is if they don't feel like you care about them, they will go and get a union. And the law is very clear on the type of employees that have a right to form, join, and organize a union without repercussion or retaliation from their employer. The law allows them to do this. If you don't want to be in a situation where your employees have lost trust with you to take care of them, then it's important that you take care of them. And that starts with putting people before profits, or else you can find yourself in a severely profitable situation with a union, because that's going to cost you to have a union. There's a cost to doing business with a union for both the employer and the employee. The collective bargaining agreement, yes, they are very thorough. Collective bargaining agreements will touch on every condition for that employee. How much you pay them, when they get an increase, how much of an increase do they get? And it's across the board. Unlike today, where you can pick and choose who you give what percent of an increase to, and you say it's based on performance, for example. It doesn't quite work that way in a union environment. You are mandated what to pay this employee based on what's negotiated in the collective bargaining agreement. This is why most companies do not want a union. They do not want to be told how to run their business. They do not want to be told how and when to spend their money. And if that is something that you do not want, then you need to make sure you're taking care of the people who have a right to make that happen and demand that in their workplace. You have to understand right now, President Biden is one of the most pro-union presidents ever. And he brags and he boasts about that. Whether or not we like it, it's his position. And he does what he can to support the union agenda. So now as an employer, you're tackling between political views, you're tackling between the union, and then trying to meet the need of your employee. So unions are something that you want to be mindful of. If you work in retail, they can come to you. Unions are not assigned by industry. It's assigned by employee classification. And it doesn't take many employees to start a union. It's not every hourly employee in your organization. There are these things called micro units, which means that it only takes 3 or more people to decide they want a union in that area. So what that means is if you operate a retail store and you have a facilities department in your store, and that facility team has 5 people and they're responsible for, the cleanliness of the store and things like that, those 5 people can decide to join or form their own union without anybody else needing to be a part of it. So it's not about the majority of your hourly population or your bargaining eligible employees. It's about the groups of them as well, and making sure you're taking care of each and every one of them. Micro units was introduced by Obama when he was in office, President Obama. So it's a fairly new concept that many people aren't familiar with, and they falsely believe that it requires everybody hourly in the organization to go through the process of getting a union, and that is no longer the case. Because Biden is so pro-union, there are also legislatures that he's trying to use the National Labor Relations Board, which is the federal governing board that oversees union activity. He's trying to push a lot of agenda through that way too. So if you're a leader or an employer and you don't want a union in your environment, then it's so important more than anything that you are taking care of your employees, and not just your employees, but you're also taking care of the people who take care of the people, which is your HR teams. The biggest way and the best way to make sure that there's an engagement level maintained in your workplace with the hourly population, if you're concerned about unions, is to invest in your middle managers. Your managers and your supervisors and your team leaders who have the direct connection with that hourly employee, you cannot forget them. They need to also feel valued and heard. You're relying on them to push a lot of the company agendas, company initiatives down to the hourly population. So it's important that you understand how they feel. You listen to them and their needs. You support them as you can, because the easiest way to lose a union election is to not have any supervisors or managers that you can rely on to help you go through the campaign. If they all hate you too, you have no chance or stance of winning. So if you truly want to maintain the direct connectedness with your workplace, and you truly care about the employees, and you truly want to make their work environments healthy, then you need to care about them. Just who they are as people first, and then worry about the profits. And then you're probably thinking, LaShawn, I need money to run my business. I need money to take care of the people and all of that. Understand there are a lot of things that you can do that don't cost much. And it starts with saying good morning and thank you. And how are you? And asking those questions of common concern. Start there. The money will come to you when the people are well taken care of. I promise you that. When you do it the other way around, it will not work out. So engagement and maintaining the direct connectedness with your workforce is going to be a critical thing if you definitely want to stay engaged with your employee population and take care of what they need so that they're not going to a union to do that for them. The other piece that I want to share with you that is important is retention. So a lot of times we focus on sign-on bonuses and recruiting the best talent and, looking external to the organization. But sometimes we got to look internally. We got to look at what talent do we have that we can expand or enlarge. Are there people that we can send to get certifications or trainings who have a desire to want to grow and develop that we can invest in that way versus investing and paying somebody $10,000 more to do that same job just because they come with the experience? Can we not build the experience? Can we not offer retention bonuses for employees who have been loyal to you versus sign-on bonuses to strangers that you do not know? The new work is going to have to understand the value in the people who stay with them. Yes, Ashley, managers often tend to think that HR is responsible for engaging and retaining employees, and it's not. That's not HR's responsibility. They're not HR's employees. They don't report into HR. They are the managers. HR is your support partner when there are things that you want to do, when there's talent that you want to assess, when there's somebody that you've identified, they in 3 years can be here. I want to help support them be here. Can you help me support them be here? That's the role of HR. It's not to develop your people. So as managers, you're going to have to take an active role in assessing your talent and rewarding those who are loyal to you, who work well, who are strong performers, who have capacity and reach to do more, and maybe just don't have the formal skill or training. That's when you implement job shadowing. That's when you implement mentors. That's when you implement coaches. That's when you provide the skills and the training and the development that they need to stretch themselves so that they can be your next. That is what you call succession planning. And succession planning has to be at the forefront of what you want to do with your employees moving forward into the future of work. The employees who are still with you, when you think about retention, you want to ask them, what keeps you here? Why are you staying? And it's not because you're surprised that they're staying. It's because you want to know what's working well for them so that you can expound on that or expand on that and make sure it never goes away. A lot of times we put so much attention on what's outside of our doors and not the talent that we have right there in the organization. There is a level of accountability that you have to help those who want to be helped. That's how you show value in them. That's how you show them you appreciate them. And that's how you show them that you admire them for what they're doing and you appreciate their efforts. Now, I'm not saying everybody is promotable because that's true. Everybody's not promotable. And there are going to be times where you're going to want outside experience and influences, but that should not be your go-to. That should not be your all the time. People can still be stretched without being promoted. You don't have to move up on the org chart just to get different. So sometimes showing value is you work really good at this level and there's a lateral move for you over in this department that I think will help you become a more well-rounded employee. So how do you feel about transitioning to a job over there? Looking out for the growth and development of your employees is a way to show them that you care. And it's going to be something that managers will start having to do as we look at the future of work. So Nicole said, I literally worked for a CEO who didn't hold his managers accountable for employee complaints and told me that it was a VP of HR that was responsible for creating the culture, and that company is now bankrupt. Listen, HR is not, the HR department is not your culture creators. They are your gatekeepers of culture. Culture starts from the top and it trickles down. So, like Ashley mentioned, stay interviews so you won't have to do exit interviews. Right. Don't put so much emphasis on exit interviews. Most of the time, people aren't filling them out anyway because they're gone, they're tired of you, and they want nothing to do with you. So now you've missed your moment and your opportunity to find out why they want to leave, why they wanted to leave. Instead, focus on why are people staying or what brought you here. In 90 days, what made you apply here? And did how we presented ourselves in the interview process align with your actual experience? Validate who we're saying we are as an organization with what people's experience is with us when they come and work with us. The employee experience is going to be a factor in the future of work. We hear a lot about employee engagement. It's not about employee engagement. Engagement has to do with employees being enthusiastic and motivated to want to do their job. And while all of that is great, it's been a focus for far too long. Now we need to work on employer engagement, where the employer and the leadership, they are engaged in the employees. They're excited about them working there. They're motivated to do more to help them feel valued and a part of the team. So focus on employer engagement because that will lead to employee commitment. And commitment is where you'll get loyalty. That's when they stay. That's when they help you improve. That's when they give feedback because you've given them a sense that you care about their voice. Focus on employer engagement and employee commitment. No more employee engagement. It's not about them being engaged. Who cares if they're excited about working here when they're not going to be here for more than 90 days because they're going to quit because the culture is so toxic? Excitement isn't matter anymore. It's now about commitment. What's going to keep them here? What's going to make them feel valued? What's going to make them feel loyal? Those are the strategies that you should be partnering with your HR teams to make sure you're able to support as a business. It's the commitment that's going to bring you business longevity, not the engagement. Engagements are moments. Commitment is lasting, it's sustainable. There's definitely a difference between the two. And if you're going to thrive in the future of work, it's important that you're able to make that distinction and understand what you're going to do to support what the goals are for your organization. So to remind everybody what we talked about, remember, you cannot treat everybody equally. You have to focus on equal outcomes and accept that there's going to be varying ways that different people and different needs that they will have to meet those outcomes. You have to also focus on retention, the retaining of your employees who are still there and finding ways to expand, stretch their reach and show them how much you value them by giving them different assignments that's going to help them grow and be better professionals. We're going to have to remember emotional intelligence and how to function under a place that we're in an emotional place in the workplace with employees because of everything that's happening socially. We cannot dismiss social events and social occurrences by saying they're not a part of what happens here. We cannot allow leaders who behave poorly or have bad conduct continue to stay and say that it has nothing to do with things that are happening in the workplace. They did that outside of the workplace. Those days are over. You have to care about what happens with your employees inside the building and outside of the building. You have to also focus on employee commitment and employer engagement. That's what's going to help you be able to sustain business by putting your people first, profits second, and trusting that the profits will come when you take care of the people. those are the top things that we wanted to share with you all tonight. And we are at the end of this episode. But I did want to touch on one thing because I got a question about this in the DM. And I'm curious to know, what your thoughts about it. And I don't know if my opinion is going to be popular or not, but I did commit to answering this on the podcast tonight because I had a couple of people asking me about the Don Lemon situation in CNN. And did I believe that he was wrongfully terminated or the situation surrounding his terminations? What were my thoughts about it? And so, because I don't work for the organization, I'm not at liberty to speak to all the intricate details. I can only speak about what I know. And what I do know is that on the surface, CNN did something that a lot of corporations don't have the courage to do, which was fire somebody with tenure. A lot of our toxic workplaces exist because we allow people who've been there for a long amount of time to stay and continue to breed toxicity just because they've been there forever. So I will say that CNN terminating his employment was, or terminating the employment agreement was something that I had not seen a lot of companies do for without pressure from the society or from the community to do so. I can also say from an HR standpoint that when you look at all that's been published, again, this is just strictly what's been alleged and what's in the news. It looks like he was moved from one show that was in the night to the morning show. The numbers weren't coming in on the morning show. People were complaining about his same mannerisms as, the night show. The tone being loud, abrasive, and aggressive is what was brought to the morning show. And nobody really wants to hear that in the morning while they're getting their kids ready for school. So I know that there were a lot of issues with how he was acclimating to his new assignment. On top of that, there were some complaints that happened in February with the comment being made about women in their 50s being out of their prime, and prime was 20 and 30s and maybe 40. So he said some comments that some people found offensive, including complaints from a coworker that he was always cutting her off or not giving her an opportunity to talk. So I said all of that to say, based on what the news showed, there seems to be an exhibited pattern of behavior that was experienced by him. He likely did something to be removed from the night show. We all know he did something in February. And then we all know, based on the news, that one of his coworkers complained about him. And then we also know that the ratings on the show that he was in were drastically low. So there were performance issues and there were conduct issues. And on the surface, it seems like CNN did what they needed to do because now he was more of a liability for the organization than an asset. His mouth was getting him in trouble, which created reputable harm for CNN, and they did what they needed to do to address the behavior. For a lot of people who believe it was wrong because he had 17 years of experience, I will say this to you. If you, as an everyday person, were to work in a corporation, you did something to get removed from your one role and had to get transferred into another role. People made complaints about you and your performance when you got into this new role beginning to decline and dwindle. You likely would be fired too. What happened based on the facts provided is not out of ordinary to what happens to people every single day in the workplace. You have people who are terminated for way less than that. So based on that, I cannot say he was wrongfully termed or there was anything unfair about what happened to him, because on the surface, it looks like it was CNN doing what they needed to do to address a poor performer, a problem employee, despite the tenure of years that he gave to the organization. And it looks like he had several chances that we can tell, because I'm certain that there are several other instances and occurrences that took place that were not publicized, because, we don't track or monitor coachings and everything isn't made public. So it makes me wonder what else is out there that we don't know. So all I can say is, CNN, you did what a lot of organizations cannot do and do not do, because I can tell you there are a lot of tenured leaders in a lot of these organizations who probably should be fired for doing a lot worse. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the term toxic workplaces. So thank you again tonight for joining this show. If you have any questions for me or anything that you'd like me to touch on the next episode, be sure to send me an email or a DM. You can connect with me on social media at the HR Plug on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. You can also send an email to hello@thehrplug.com if there is something that you'd like for me to ask or answer for you. And lastly, if you have not done so, I would ask you to subscribe to this podcast on the YouTube page. If you're not watching on YouTube, head over to YouTube and make sure that you subscribe to this episode. It lets me know that you appreciate this content and it helps other people see it as well. So that wraps up tonight's episode of the HR Plug podcast. I thank you all for joining. I thank you for your levels of engagement. If you need any help with making sure that your workplace culture is what it needs to be for your employees, you can go to www.thehrplug.com and look at the services that we're able to provide to help you navigate through creating a workplace culture that is healthy and what it needs to be to meet the needs of the employees today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you next week right here on the HR Plug podcast. Have a good one.